here for me. I don't know about anyone else here. Hi, everyone. So I want to take a minute to introduce myself. Although I feel like I've done this about 20 times, but I will do it 20 more times if it means you know my name and my face and where to find me. My name is Odette Marie Rodriguez, and I am the new program coordinator for the Center for Women's Studies. I love being snapped. This is my office right here. Obviously, I've said this 10 times as well, but I have cute pink lights. Pink lights are usually the sign that I'm in and I'm willing to chat, and you can just walk in and talk to me. We are going to go over a few announcements, and I'm going to introduce someone. But I did want to begin by recognizing that, yes, come in, that we are on occupied land. This is Haudenosaunee land. So the Center for Women's Studies always wants to make a point to recognize that we are currently on occupied land whenever we gather to have these beautiful conversations. I did want to introduce someone just to put a name and a face to some of our campus resources. So Rochelle Robinson is going to tell us about herself and what she does.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to have a few moments of your time. Some of you may have seen me, and I'm going to echo what Odette said, and that I feel like I've said this 100 times, but I'm sure there's some new folks in here who've never seen me. So I am the campus advocate from Help Restore Hope Center. So we are the domestic and sexual violence program here in Madison County. So I actually am here on Tuesdays. I'm here on campus from 10 to 4. I do like to come to these whenever I can, so you'll probably see me around. But I am able to provide some services to folks who have been affected by sexual or domestic or other violence. So my office is located in Haven. I actually share Denise's office while she's out doing some other things. So I appreciate her being able to share that. So if anyone ever needs to talk with me at all, feel free to stop by again on Tuesdays from 10 to 4. I think there might be some of our brochures around as well. So we have a hotline, a 24/7 hotline that's available to folks. And how many of you have heard about the new SANE program here in Hamilton? So that's something that happened in conjunction with our program and also with the help of Colgate University and the voices of students. So just like shout out to all the students who had a part in that, because I really want to make that known that came from you guys. So never think that a couple of voices can't do a lot. Okay. So thank you. I just want to say hey and enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do want to take a second that if you don't know the person next to you, let's take the next 30 seconds to say hi and how are you doing? All right, beautiful. I love the love. I'm here for the love. I appreciate the love. It's great. Cool. So before we get into our panel, I want to say welcome to the first hardcore official brown bag of the semester. So a few announcements. After this is where I'm heading after this brown bag. Sherazad Garcia is installing her piece, It's So Sunny That It's Dark. And we'll also hold a workshop today until 4 p.m. They will have an artist introduction at 2 p.m. And it is, she's going to lead a conversation about memory and freedom, politics of color in visual arts. And she's going to provide postcards that are kind of going to become this communal project that will be around Colgate and asks the question, how do you color freedom? So that's after this. I'm heading over. Come with me. Where? In the coop. Thank you. Who said where? Because you are rockstar. Thank you. I forget important things. All right, so the student involvement fair is on Thursday. No, it's tomorrow. I even wrote tomorrow down. From 4:30 to 6:30 at the Academic Quad. WITS will be there, so say hi to me, but other wonderful campus groups will be there as well. Alana Palooza is Thursday from 4:30 to 7 at Alana. There's going to be amazing food. There's going to be performances and just great company. So please, please, please go check that out. That is Thursday. And our next brown bag next Tuesday is a guest speaker from the University of London, Professor Joanna Bork. She's going to be presenting her brown bag, Sexual Violence, Science, and Medicine, a History. So please come out and support her, especially because she came quite a long way. Thank you. Cool. So if you need to leave during the presentation, please do so quietly. Remember to clean up around you. Please, please, please. We have trash cans and recycling bins for paper products. And if you can stay and help stack chairs, please do, because these things are really heavy. They take a lot of time. So if you have the time, please stay and help us. All right, so our speakers for today, I finally got to the important part. You are important. Okay. Our speakers today are Jehdeiah Mixon, Chinyere Okogeri, and the lovely Rubey. They'll be talking about their experiences, journeys to calling themselves feminists, maybe not calling themselves feminists, during their time at Okogeri. Also, at one point, I'll be passing out these cute little adorable sheep. They're paper. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, and this gives you an anonymous venue to do so, so you don't have to put yourself out there. This is a low-risk activity. I'll be passing these out. So without further ado, because this has taken forever, welcome to Women's Studies. Thank you so much for showing up, and give it to our wonderful panelists.
Hi, my name is Rubey. I am a senior here at Okogeri. I'm an educational studies major. I'm a mumbler, so if you need me to speak up, please let me know. I use they, them, and theirs pronouns. That means when you refer to me, you say, hey, we're really awesome today, it's brown bag. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chinyere. Pronouns she, her, hers. I am a senior as well. I major in behavioral neuroscience and minor in women's studies. And I'll be the girl that's holding like a loose leaf and reading notes from there. So let's see that.
I am Jehdeiah Mixon, sociology major, philosophy minor. She, her, hers as well. And yeah, I guess girl, woman type thing for computer.
Okay. So the first question we're kind of just going to answer is just our journey towards the F word, which if you haven't gotten yet, that means feminism. So my journey to feminism, I think I first heard it when I was in high school, and people would I went to a Catholic high school, I'll preface with that, and they would call an English professor a feminist and say that she was man-hating, always about women rights, and etc. So when I heard that, I was like, what? So that was the same lady that gave me detention for my phone being out. So I was just like, it doesn't add up. You're supposed to speak up for me. So I think that was the first time I heard it. And then when I came to college, the term kind of resurfaced when I took an Intro to WIMS class. And it was pretty amazing that I was learning the term from a woman of color. And so by doing so, I was able to figure out that there's many definitions of feminism and how that embodies itself. And so currently, I don't exactly claim the term as feminism, simply because I find that I think we'll also talk about this later on, but it can be very divisive. But I do follow some of the practices. And I think my current definition of feminism as of today, right now, is that it's about equality, political, social, economic equality for all, and also just that God is probably a Black woman.
Yeah, so I actually don't know if I consider myself a feminist or a womanist, and I think that has to do a lot with the way I tend to see like feminism being practiced, or at least white feminism, and then like looking at like the first wave of feminism, which was like traditionally white women. And don't get me wrong, some of them were like suffragists, abolitionists, etc. But it was very centered around white women and elite white women, not working class women, not women of color, none of that. And I think womanism tends to be more encompassing of my identity. And yeah, I think the identity, like we're all marginalized. Don't get me wrong, we're all marginalized in the patriarchy, of capitalism, racism, you name it. But there are some identities that tend to be more marginalized severely, and I think womanism is more encompassing of that. And I would say that my journey to, I guess, feminism, womanism came at an early age before I actually had the language that I do now. My privilege of going to like this fine institution and taking the classes and just meeting the wonderful people I did. But basically growing up in a matrifocal household, meaning that like the head of my family was my grandmother, was my mother, was my aunt, and they taught me just about almost everything I know about womanhood and about feminism, and is where a large portion of my practice, my feminist or like womanist practice comes from. Yeah, growing up in like inner city, working class, and seeing the way my matrifocal family not only cared for each other, but cared for members in our community, and without actively thinking of it, because a lot of the practices that they embodied just came out of the need for like survival, more than anything else, and like reaffirming like our existence, not only as like Black women, but like in the context of like my small town, but like in the United States and in this world, which can often do the opposite of affirming that. Yeah, I think I lost my train of thought, but you got it. And how they care for others. Yeah. And I would say similarly to Chinyere, womanism to me extends beyond gender equality to like economic equality, like but capitalism. Yeah, and it encompasses more than just women, but like queer bodies, gender non-conforming bodies, in prison, the prison population encompasses like so much. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that my journey to feminism started off with very much like second wave white feminism, which is like upper middle class white women saying, I don't have to work. I can work outside of the home. And I was like, heck yeah, like I'm 16. I'm going to have a job when I grow up. Like, this is awesome. And so that was pretty much where I sat until I got to Colgate. And I remember reading Freedom Summer, which was our like required text. And I thought this was so cool. These were students who were going to college, doing what I was about to be doing. They were ready to change the world. And I was so inspired. And then I got to class and we had a conversation about the book. And this boy said, well, I don't see race when I look at people. So this is like not really a conversation we need to have. And I thought, that's weird. That's not really what I got out of this book. But okay. Yeah, I don't know. Sitting in the back, kind of scared and quiet. And then the sit-in happened in my first year, and there just how many people don't know about the sit-in at Colgate? Okay. So a lot of people have heard about it. Maybe that's something we can talk about a little more, if we want to. But that was something that really like woke me up in some ways, and I saw a lot of really empowering. I saw a lot of really powerful, thoughtful and careful women of color speaking their minds and saying like there are changes that need to happen on this campus, and we want to fight for them, and we can fight for them. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are the people that did read Freedom somehow, or like thought something about it, and so I, started talking to a lot more people about things like racism at Colgate, which is real in case you just got here. And everyone was like, take a women's studies course, take a women's studies course. It'll really like open your mind. And it did in a lot of ways. And it was also a lot of middle class white feminism. And that was fine. But then I started to realize that feminism wasn't about me in the ways that I thought it would be. Because so I think that what I'm learning about feminism right now is that it's about how to be nice to people, which sounds so simple, but it's not at all easy, because it's about learning people's histories and their oppressions and marginalizations and their personal histories, and how do you care for someone and treat them with love, knowing those things.
And I think just to add to that, I've also become to define feminism as a dialogue where you can have that exchange of perspectives, and where, similar to what Jehdeiah was saying earlier, people don't have to choose between their cultural backgrounds and their womanhood, which I think is a pretty big thing. So now we're going to try to transition this term of feminism to how it's not shown on campus. So yeah, we're going to get a little critical.
Okay.
How'd you do that?
I don't know. Like, I do know, but I'm gonna try to articulate it. Okay, so I feel like there's a couple things going on at Colgate's campus. So we do have I think a decent amount of individuals who would consider mostly like queer individuals, gender non-conforming individuals, and then like cishet women who would consider themselves feminism. But I don't really see that. I think there exists this overarching feminist concept, and maybe I shouldn't call it feminism because it's not intersectional at all. It's white feminism, and then you have gender non-conforming bodies, queer bodies, and people of color, mostly like women of color, on the outskirts, practicing what I actually consider, feminism. It's very intersectional in their approach. On this other side, remember, white feminism, or not feminism, intersectional feminism. And on this one side, you see this white feminism that is very centered around positive sexuality and sexual assault, but only when the survivors happen to be white women. It's not inclusive of working class women at all. It's not inclusive of women of color, gender non-conforming bodies, you name it. Very much centered around positive sexuality, sexual assault when it comes down to white women. And when I'm missing something, you want to chime in? No. Okay. And then, it's very superficial in my opinion.
How many people have heard the term white feminism? How many people feel like they have a confident understanding of that term? Okay. So to me, what white feminism looks like doesn't mean that you're white and you're a feminist. It's a lot more complicated than that. Like Jehdeiah was saying, it's about centering white womanhood as this understanding of who feminism is for. So a lot of the history of feminism that we study is white feminism, like getting the right to vote, we're working outside the home, thanks Taylor, things like that. But that doesn't affect, and it does affect a lot of other women and other people, but just like that being centered. And then an intersectional form of feminism would be thinking about race and class, thinking about women who are incarcerated, thinking about trans women who are incarcerated, thinking about sex workers, all these other forms of womanhood and also personhood that are affected by the gender binary and by the patriarchy.
And then often what I see is you have women of color and also gender nonconforming people of color on this campus practicing, and like the feminist practice is intersectional, etc. And then often you see white feminists come in and piggyback off that work without including like those marginalized communities at all. So like if your feminism is about just like freeing the nipple, and I'm laughing, I'm not wearing a bra, but like no, I'm being dead ass. And reproductive rights, but only when it pertains to and I don't want to assume everybody's like socioeconomic class or like racial identity, but if it's reproductive rights that are not centering working class women, especially poor working class women of color. If your feminism isn't encompassing of, you know, gender nonconforming bodies, and even I'm gonna try to explain men to a certain extent, because like feminism is also for men too. Men need feminism because like we're all affected under patriarchy. It's just toxic to everyone in different ways, but to everyone, it is harmful and damaging.
But another one is geography, especially on this campus. So the idea that we are in a basement of a dorm just tells you how much we're valued, right? And also how Dana Art Center is down the hill, right? So just that idea of like the placing and how we value what actually gets seen on the quad. The fact that the chapel is really Christian and Catholic. The chapel house is for essentially other religions, and that's far behind Frank. Then also just the accessibility of getting to these spaces, both now and in the wintertime. The only dorms with elevators is Drake and Curtis. Yeah. And then also, if you were to go down the hill and let's talk Broad Street, the Greek Life buildings are the ones that are right there as soon as you cross the street. There are some interest house, but not all. Apartments and all that townhouses and stuff are much further away. So where's the emphasis on what gets to be seen on campus when you're down the hill? Then if you want to move into more Greek Life buildings, why is it that certain frats have high porches and the sororities don't have high porches? And just that idea of that, you can think of that in the number of sororities compared to fraternities. It's also something that we lack equal access to.
I think a huge challenge I have with practicing feminism at Colgate is particularly around conversations about Greek life and thinking about how people are so very defensive of it for the many things that they get out of it without realizing how deeply exclusionary it is, not only to people who are gender nonconforming like myself, who would literally not be welcome in any Greek life home on campus, because I don't identify as a man or a woman. So there's that. There's conversations about sexuality, positive sexuality, that don't really include talking about people with non-normative bodies or non-normative gender identities. So very much like positive sexuality is how to make sure that you're a man and the woman that you're having sex with or that you want to have sex with consents to it, which is certainly an important conversation and one that maybe a lot of people haven't had. But I think that you can have a deeper and more critical conversation that is very inclusive by thinking about all types of people who have sex, because everyone, yeah, everyone might have sex.
Oh, and I also forgot sports. So you can tell like how the hockey stadium was just built again. how certain sports are valued, and certain people that play those sports, I think is also something like this, how big those spaces are and what actually gets publicized. So it applies everywhere, y'all. Just saying.
And then going back into, and sorry to like break it into like a dichotomy, because don't get me wrong, it's a lot more complicated than that, and like the POC, the women of color community, and same with like the white community as a whole, overall. But like for the sake of this conversation, I make sweeping generalizations. My brain is working today, and feel free to challenge me on that. And then also another challenge I see in pertaining to like feminism or like womanism on this campus is that I personally don't feel that white women see women of color as women. Yeah. I think we are these things that exist, like these magical unicorns. Don't get taken into like consideration at all. And then there's this myth of like the competition between Colgate women, and I think that is very much from what I see, like a white feminist / white woman type of thing, because I definitely don't feel in competition with like my sisters of color, and I definitely don't feel that white women, not that you should see women of color as women, let alone like competition, your competition. So it feels like within your group, just from like dialogues I have and what I observe, is that like you're competing with each other. So not only is there not solidarity even within like the white woman community, the white feminist community, but there's definitely not solidarity between all the different groups. So
and I think another issue or challenge that faces this campus is men. And not like, I'm not trying to say it like that, but
I'll say it like that.
like it is. Men in regards to like participation and being willing to identify as feminist, or even saying that I'm okay with things being equal, because apparently by saying that it kind of gets rid of your masculinity. I don't know how. When feminism is just saying that like the way that you're being taught doesn't necessarily need to be taught that way. You don't have to be strong all the time. It's okay to. That's why I say God is a black woman, because God does it all, and that's okay for men to do it all as well. So I think that's also been an issue on this campus when it also comes to activism. You'll see a lot more women participating in activism than you do see of men, and women of color. Like Jehdeiah was saying, depending on the topic and what people find as priorities on this campus. So I would say that is also another challenge that is faced. Okay, so it's not great that we would just give you all this negative, right? So we're also going to tell you how you can positively find spaces, if that is there for you, or spaces that more specifically helped us, and not like being destroyed by this campus and some of its issues. So yeah.
I very lovingly call the Women's Study Center my home up the hill. So I'm very happy that you're all here. Welcome. But I also work here. I'm an LGBTQ initiatives intern. Our office is in the center. This is the place that I have up the hill that has my bathroom that anyone can use. We have couches, there's a printer. I mean, like everything I could possibly need is right in this place. And so many wonderful people come in this space, come in and out throughout the day. And we just talk about everything, about feminism and its problems and what we need and what we want and what we hope for. So this is definitely a place that I find feminism in.
yeah, I agree. Lunch is definitely one of them, but I also find feminist spaces like in my other classes as well. I remember some of them. One of the most affirming classes I took was last semester, and it was actually a philosophy class. And traditionally in philosophy, when discussing the topic matter, it's always man this, man that, God is a he, etc. And my philosophy professor, Nathaniel Boltius, will actually use she instead of he, and it seems like such a small change, but it was really like revolutionary to me. As soon as he did it, I was just like what? I'm so used to like just philosophy, not only like the professors, but like the classrooms and the topics being so white male dominated. So for him to kind of invert that and then use she as the pronoun when it came to God, when it came to the philosopher, etc., was very empowering in a space that I traditionally don't feel empowered as a queer woman of color. So.
I would say that there are a few spaces. I'd say WIMS, I'd say clubs, but I also do think, to make it a little more complex, that sometimes it's not about the space, but the people that are in the space, because those people can corrupt the class, people can corrupt the space, and so I would say more so it's the people that you can feel that you can have dialogue with, that are from different perspectives, that you don't judge, that you don't add anything extra to it, but just talk and learn and just do that. I think is that feminist space that anybody can find. It doesn't necessarily have to be a club or a building that allows it. Like my bedroom is feminist myself. So yeah. And I don't know if people filled out the paper that was passed around. But also, if you didn't, feel free to ask any questions that you do have. They don't necessarily have to be on paper. The paper was just to ensure that if you wanted it to be private, it could be private.
Have them going around if you have it.
We got one on the paper, so we'll start, and then we'll pass back.
Also, if you're more comfortable with like raising your hand, you can do that too. Or just shouting out questions as well.
Okay, so the question is feminism only for women? Is feminism only fight for women's rights, or is there more to it? And to me, there's absolutely more to it, and feminism is not only for women. The gender binary hurts us all. The same practice that tells, like the same force that tells women to be soft and kind and sweet and play with their baby dolls and wear pink dresses is the same force that tells men, don't cry, be tough, play with the trucks, you can't be soft. So absolutely feminism is for everyone, and I think that men in particular need to be practicing it.
Yeah, I would also agree with that as well. And I think why you only hear that women are feminists, and like if you were to Google, it'll probably say promoting women equality. I think it's simply because we do look at this as a binary thing, and how just the truth in patriarchy, men have it all, and women don't have that yet. So it looks like it's just fighting for women's equality simply because we don't have that and trying to bring that up. But I do think it is for everyone, and it doesn't need to be seen as that binary.
How will we engage more men into the conversation of feminism? Because men as a whole feel they are not invited to the conversation. I don't know, but like one way I try to in the words of Kanye, you ain't got the answer, Sway. I think we have the answers, but I can only talk about like my personal practice in trying to engage men, and primarily men of color, who I think are harmed by like toxic masculinity, which is like a byproduct of like patriarchy, etc. They tend to be harmed more than just men as this overarching group. And pretty much I just try to explain how patriarchy denies us all, especially men, like parts of their humanity. Humanity, like when you're told, you're not allowed to cry, or you shouldn't like pink, or I don't know, ballet or whatever, like things that you just may naturally find yourself attracted to just because of your gender or your sex. Like that's damaging. And yeah, to not like fully feel and not to be like fully given the capacity to be pretty much the human that you would love to be because of something so like asinine and stupid, like race, asinine, stupid. Don't get me wrong, like the consequences, real. Same with gender, like, but it's all socially constructed. So to deny like yourself parts of parts of like your humanity because of that is just like damaging. So trying to explain like how freeing it would all be if we could just truly be ourselves, like what we like, do what we want to do, without, being judged for such like superficial qualities or like characteristics like gender and sex. And that tends to sometimes, bring more men into the conversation, but it could be a lot. And sometimes like people aren't ready for that. Like you meet people where they're at, but you don't leave them where they're at. So yeah, but like also opening up the conversation so that it isn't like this narrow conception of feminism that is only centered around like reproductive rights and positive sexuality for certain bodies and not others. A name?
First, I just want to say thank you to myself for taking the time. Really great. And Jehdeiah, I resonated with what you said earlier about you identified with feminism even before you had the language. So I was wondering, and this is a question for all of you, how do you explain like your theories and what you believe to someone who may not have language, who may not have had the opportunity to be in like classrooms or discussions like this?
I think it's a little hard, but I do think it can be simpler. So just thinking of like, I think feminism also has a lot to do with just questioning, right? You're questioning a lot of stuff. All of us as children, toddlers even, we asked why this, why that, why is this doing this, why is that doing that, and that essentially was a start because you're already questioning why are we programmed and why is society telling us that we need to do this, right? So if you just continue, I think that questioning and maybe just having that space of saying like, what are you unhappy with today, and then like going from not to always make things critical, but you have to, I guess, in a little bit to kind of make that conversation happen. And sometimes don't use the big words, I think, too, because it's really easy to make examples of just how fighting feminism doesn't necessarily have to be under the term of feminism, and just that.
Yeah, I think that's something that I still struggle with personally because I realize like outside of that, like this ivory tower, not that the theory isn't important, but like it doesn't matter if like someone isn't, doesn't have food to eat or like clothes to put on their back or like struggling to provide, just provide like the basic needs or get the basic needs, provide the basic needs for like survival. So trying to not eliminate theory, but not prioritize that, but be more praxis focused, because at the end of the day, like people can forget, all the jargon, all the theory behind it, but something that is more likely to linger is whatever the praxis, the action behind that. So it's not always having like the concepts and all like the literature and information behind like feminism or like womanism, but hopefully this makes sense, but like feeling it and just trying to embody it, even if you can't always describe it or, reference some Audre Lorde or Angela Davis piece of work. I think, somehow trying to transmit like the feeling of feminism is most important in reaching audiences that may not be privileged to this information that we are. And then there was another hand somewhere over there. I think you're Mackenzie. Oh yeah, hi Mackenzie.
I was thinking about when you were talking about your professor that was using like feminine pronouns for God and things like that. I was thinking of kind of the opposite. How do you deal with professors that are kind of pushing like sexist or racist using class or like after when you're talking to them? Have you ever experienced that?
Well, personally, I try to like embody fearlessness, even though like I have the worst anxiety and I'm oftentimes like just scared. So personally, I feel like I have nothing to lose, regardless of what I do or what I don't do, because like sometimes inaction is the greatest action. I'm going to be judged. So I would love to be judged on my own terms. So meaning that if you say some bullshit, I'm gonna challenge you on that bullshit. And if you don't like me because I challenge you on that bullshit, then I don't know what to tell you. Because at the end of the day, like, you know, I try to be about my liberation and the liberation of, you know, others. I believe that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And I try to live up to that as much as I can. I fail sometimes, definitely not perfect. But each day I do actively try to embody like my core values in the classroom, outside the classroom, made a couple enemies, burned a couple bridges, but like sometimes that's just what you gotta do in life. So I think trying to live as fearlessly and then like realize that it's not about you. Like it is about you, don't get me wrong, like it is about my liberation, but like there are greater things in stake than some professor's ego or like a friendship, because if they really care, then yeah, they will listen to what you have to say and then adjust accordingly, you know, get information, you know?
So I wanted to ask, you all are talking a lot about practice and, you know, feminine space and how you kind of, the spaces that are feminine. I'm just wondering if you can provide some tips or some practices that you use to turn a space into a feminine space. You know, a space where it's open to people of color, women of color, disabled bodies, basically the non-normative body, whatever that normative body is. But yeah, you.
In this sense, I think that language, the ways that we speak to each other and say things, are so hugely important. So I remember my sophomore year, I tried out for and was an actor in This Is Not a Play About Sex. Yeah, it's really cool. And I remember going to rehearsals and we sat in together, and the directors were very explicit about saying like, hi everyone, instead of saying guys and girls or just guys. The directors were very explicit about saying like, if you are able to do this, please help us. So thinking about access and who's able to do things, right? Like, no one in the Women's Studies Center is going to say, you have to pick up that chair and put it back, because maybe you're not able to. I'm not able to. So thinking about who is able and how do you speak to people without knowing everything about them. Going back to the This Is Not a Play About Sex example, like, it just meant so much to me that someone was like, hi everyone, like, we're so happy that all of you are here, rather than like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, because I felt so included in those moments, and it was just like, it meant the world to me.
I would agree with that. I think language is a big thing. I'm going to stress dialogue again, and say that I think that it's okay to just have conversations, and whether that be in like a fishbowl style, where you have, if you separate people's identities, but let them identify themselves, and then just voice all their concerns so that people can not understand, but just hear what they have to say, and then from that, make a plan on how you guys want your meetings to be, if you are making this into a club or however that looks like. But yeah, I was stressing that dialogue and not putting any labels on anybody or defining people based off of just how they appear could possibly allow for that feminist space to just happen on its own. Because I think also, if you haven't noticed, I keep saying feminism is this and I keep changing it each time. Feminism does not have a definition and it's very subjective. That feminism is also being uncomfortable. And so spaces like that can be okay as long as it's not harmful as well. Physically, things like that, but it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Can you repeat your question?
Just any kind of tips or any practices that you recommend for turning a space into a feminist space. And again, that's also a vague term, but I'm kind of referring to a space that's inclusive of not only women, but people of color, people who are disabled, people who process
I think trying to think as critically as possible about how you care for other people. Are you caring for other people on your own terms, or like based on what they need as an individual or as like a subset of a population, which looks different for a woman of color, looks different for like queer bodies, gender nonconforming bodies, working class bodies, etc. And not that that is the easiest thing, but like oppression isn't easy. Getting to a place where we are all liberated isn't easy, and it is exhausting. But yeah, just trying to do that. And I guess some ways I try to embody that is and not that like my womanist or like feminist practice is the best, but this is just some things I do, is cooking for other people, especially when I know for whatever reason they may not be eating enough, whether they don't have the resources to go grocery shopping or, they're just busy running around, trying to keep the wheels turning in this place. I do a lot of people's hair, which for it's so weird because I find like in this space, I've encountered so many people who think that just because somebody's lower resource, that they also don't care about their appearance and don't want to look nice, which that's just asinine to me. And especially being in a small white town where there isn't hair shops that cater to curlier hair patterns or ethnic hair, etc. Doing and also just the history of hair in communities of color, and how to me that is doing someone else's hair is one of the greatest forms and purest forms of love I know, and it's always been that way in communities of color and the Black community or Black communities specifically throughout history from the times of enslavement to now. So that's another way, or that's another part of my feminist praxis, and also trying to make space for people to be themselves, whatever that looks like. Yeah, and encouraging that, and also sticking up for people. I don't know.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Can you speak up, please? I'm sorry.
I'm a freshman at my high school.
Okay. At my high school, Asian people aren't considered people of color, so I'm just interested to hear anyone's experience with that. Can I respond? Hi, my name is Rubey. I'm a senior. That's one of them.
Yeah.
And that's a really good question. I am really involved in OASIS. It stands for Organization of Weakness, Sisters, and Solidarity.
and we're a group on campus that where we talk about issues of Asian American identities, racism and marginalization of the Asian American women identifying people like race in particular, and we try to build community and support network for Asian women students on campus. So if you're more interested in talking about like racism, and Asian identities, and Asian American identities, we're gonna be at the activities fair tomorrow, and our email is also oasis@colgate.edu. So if you have any questions, you can always send it to the email. My email is like you can also email me. But I think that's a great conversation we could have here at WIMS or in Oasis. I just wanted to let you know that there's like a specific organization that like talks about those issues. So yeah, and Asians are, I don't know, maybe people of color, like how the term comes. I don't know if that's worth mentioning here. Because I know like the history of like the term people of color and like women of color. So I remember like I remember like in sport meetings like we would watch the video of the where yeah. Like my understanding is that the term like people of color were founded by Black women who were thinking about like standing solidarity, how to like build solidarity amongst people of color. Who I guess is like non-white people. So I sort of see it like I sort of see people of color and women of color as like a term of solidarity for people who don't identify as white. So I consider myself I'm Asian and I consider myself a person of color. But yeah, I don't know.
And also, yeah, no, that's really real, and thank you for pointing that out. And I also just want to note that that is like a byproduct of whiteness, to divide marginalized communities and like pit them against each other. Oh, don't get me wrong, like there are different like historical realities that explain, why some people consider, Asian individuals white or like the model minority, etc. But yeah, I think that's something that communities of color definitely need to work on, but do realize that that is, a byproduct of whiteness and how it functions. And that we all need to stick together. It can't just be like Black people or like Latinx people or indigenous people against whiteness. It needs to be everybody, including white people, especially white people. White people, whiteness, two different things. Remember that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nobi. I'm a sophomore. So
That's my brother.
So I'm a feminist, or like I know there's like different feminists or like spectrum of feminism. So I was watching a video about sexual assault. I don't know the name of this woman who it was a TEDx video, and she talked about how sexual assault was sometimes like in general, I think men, specifically like white men, white cis heterosexual men, and Black, like just cis heterosexual men don't feel invited to the conversation of like sexual assault because like most oftentimes it's primarily focused on like women. So like how would you make that personal to kind of like invite that to the conversation? Although I don't like her strategy of like inviting them to the conversation is a little like questionable because I don't agree with it, but like how would you make it personal to them?
So I think that sort of question is about how do you bring people with privileged identities into conversations about the oppression that they either explicitly enforce or like benefit from. So like, how do you get white people to talk about racism or white supremacy? How do you get straight people to talk about heterosexism? And I think that it has to do with understanding that all liberation is bound up with each other. So like that's an Aboriginal activist group's quote from the 70s, and it's like they say, if you're coming here to help me, then you're wasting your time. But if you come here because you see that your liberation is bound in mine, then we can work together. And I think that that's perhaps just a very simple way to say that's how you, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's something that I think about, is that this matters to everyone, right? The sexual assault matters to everyone, not only because cis-het men are sexually assaulted, but also because it's a better world for everyone if no one's being sexually assaulted.
Wild thought.
And also, men who get it, whatever, even though like we're always learning, etc., need to bring other men to the table. White people need to bring other white people to the table. Straight people need to bring other straight people to the table. Yeah, it shouldn't solely be on marginalized communities or marginalized identities to do the job of bringing people who, you know, may, I don't want to say like benefit more from like whatever like system of oppression we're talking about, or maybe like less affected, even though we're all affected, to the table. Everyone needs to do their part, pretty much. So if you hold like whatever privileged identity, it is your job. Once again, it is your job to bring other people with that privileged identity to the table.
It's now or never.
So, just looking at the time and helping out, we just wanted to say thank you so much to our panel for being awesome and amazing. And also, we wanted to thank all of you lovely people for joining us at Women's Studies for this brown bag. We do hope that you enjoyed the topic that was discussed, and if you have time, you can come and talk with the panelists who will be here for a little bit longer. But we also know how classes are running too. And also, we invite you to come join us next week, Tuesday, for our next brown bag.
Just take my paycheck. Just, here you go. Please remember to put your trash in the trash can. If you have papers and things that you feel can go in the paper recycling, please do so. Sherazad Garcia. They will have that artist presentation at 2 p.m. But the whole project is running until 4. So if you can, stay and help if you're able to. And thank you all for coming. You're great. I love you. I love you.
Can I introduce you to someone? Yeah.
Yes, you slid. Because I know you were like,
It's all good. We need one more. Wait, let's take one on the raft.
Sorry, everyone.
You're fine, Doug.
Thank you so much. What was the last time I made?
I'm eating, I swear. Stop making your face.
Alright, I'm gonna go up to the coach.
And then cameras crashed the party and I had to crawl out a window.
Oh, those will stay. Yeah. Thank you. We're gonna put them on the small table. I just haven't gotten it out yet.
No, my book bag was shining.
Oh my gosh, I'm joking. I'm not used to not sweater, you are. Don't worry, I used to really sweat.
And which is great. It's a like it was like the very best thing ever. And we had this guy, like, I don't know how to say it, and we talked about how like he goes from sympathy to empathy to passion.
Oh yeah.
We're like instead of like reading emotion, you're in the hole and you're feeling hard, like it's happening the next step where you're like you're like this stuff, like you're not getting emotionally invested, so like you can stay like in your mind. So you're not like sometimes how do you like help someone out if you're like crying? Like sometimes you don't need someone to cry with you, sometimes you need them to like listen and then you're like trying to hear you. Like, feeling with you or not.